Thanks for joining us, Natalie. Why do Indigenous peoples want their rights entrenched in Australia's constitution?
Well, we wanted this voice to Parliament, which was the proposition that we recently voted on at the weekend, enshrined in the Constitution so that it could never be taken away, basically. Indigenous people here came together and called for this advisory body, this voice to Parliament. We have had representative bodies and advisory bodies in the past here in Australia, but they've been able to be abolished by the government of the day. So the reason it was so important to many people to change it in the Constitution was so that that voice, that advisory body, couldn't be taken away. But sadly, Australians voted at the weekend that they didn't want to change the Constitution.
What do you think this recognition of Indigenous rights in the Constitution would have meant, in everyday terms?
I think it just would have made Indigenous people here in this country felt seen and heard. We are the first peoples of this continent, now called Australia. We have, we're one of the oldest living cultures in the world. We go back 65,000 years, yet we're simply not acknowledged in Australia's constitution, in the nation's birth certificate. So I think, recognition would have meant a lot to Indigenous people here and would have helped us then build on that and move forward. There are also calls that came out of the same document that called for the voice to Parliament for treaty and for truth-telling. So this was seen as the first step towards those things and really kind of, I guess, coming together and accepting this country's past, which, like where you are in your country, hasn't been the best. There's been many atrocities committed against our people. So this was sort of seen as the first step towards, treaty making and truth telling in this country.
Yeah, given that shared history, I saw a lot of people online here in Canada saying, well, not a big shock here that this has happened. But what do you think was behind this being voted down?
I think there were a number of reasons, one of which I think perhaps people didn't understand, potentially what the change that was being asked for. So there was a very sort of successful slogan going around that if you don't know, vote no. And it sort of appears, and I'm no pollster, but it sort of appears that that might have been what's happened. I think, we only make up 3% First Nations people here in Australia of the population. There have been many surveys done over the years that show that 80% of Australians, particularly those that live in cities, have never come in contact with an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person. So, they're being asked to vote on an issue to do with, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander affairs, and they don't really understand because they don't have any Aboriginal friends. So, or they don't, have an understanding of the issues that are facing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. There's obviously a lot of other things going on in the world right now that are sort of dominating the news cycle. Cost of living is a huge issue here in Australia, and I think there was a feeling that, to many people, that they wanted to see the politicians and the government addressing other issues as opposed to Indigenous issues. So, and I think, not a lot of people understand constitutional law. I'm sure that's probably a pretty universal thing. So a lot of people couldn't understand why the need to change the Constitution. So, they voted no. But having said that, there is a whole range of reasons that we've heard as to why people voted no or yes. But certainly, yeah, as I said, I think a lot of it came down to people perhaps not being engaged with Indigenous issues and understanding why this was so important to so many First Nations people.
Just briefly here, Natalie, some are saying that this is a major blow for reconciliation in Australia. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that was one of the stronger things we heard come out on Saturday night when the result became known, and it became known within 90 minutes of polls closing too. So it was a very sort of landslide defeat. And yeah, a lot of people said, look, this is the death of reconciliation in this country. We've had a few days pass now, and I think a lot of people say, okay, well, perhaps it's not the death knell for reconciliation in this country, but certainly it is seen as a major setback. I think a few people were, this is sort of now, I guess, being seen, the referendum, as a poll on, the state of reconciliation here, and some of us were surprised that it was such a landslide defeat. But there are also some positives that can come out of this in terms of we saw a lot of people, obviously 40% of Australia did vote yes, and we did see during the campaign leading into this referendum a lot of non-Indigenous Australians who had never engaged with Indigenous issues, never campaigned or advocated for Indigenous issues, come out in support of the yes vote. So I think we can take some hope there that we now have identified this amazing army of allies who can perhaps help us now, pick up the pieces and find a new way forward. It won't be through a constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament, but certainly now we're waiting to plot out the way forward. Many of the supporters of the yes campaign here in Australia have actually called for a week of silence this week. They called that on Saturday night. So we haven't heard a lot of people come out yet and start talking about the next steps. Currently, many of our First Nations people who were supportive of the yes are taking a little bit of time out to heal, to be together, to yarn, and then I'm sure in the days ahead we'll start working out what the next steps are towards reconciliation in this country in light of Saturday night's referendum result.
Well, Natalie, we'll have to leave it there, but of course we'll be watching here as well. Appreciate you speaking with us this early in the morning for you.
Thanks so much for your time.